This is the BreadWinner Podcast, hosted by entrepreneur, influencer, and sales wolf, Tyler Harris, bringing you the insights from the most successful forward-thinking entrepreneurs and influencers, so that you can rise to the top and make more dough.
Now, let's get into the show.
All right, what's up, everybody? This is the BreadWinner Podcast, and I'm your host, Tyler Harris. Glad to have you here today. I am also glad to have a special guest on the podcast today, and she's actually here in the studio with me live, which is always fun to do most of these remotely, but when I can have someone here, it's even better. And I'm extremely excited for you guys to get to know Miss Wendy Dieterlen, one of my favorite human beings on this planet. We've known each other for, how long have we known it? 8 years? 9 years?
8 or 9 years.
Probably longer than I've known anyone except my parents. But I've just enjoyed getting to know her over the last few years, but I've always had an insane amount of respect for the business person that she is. And we're going to get into some of that because that's really, this is a business podcast, and so we're going to get into a lot of that. But she's an entrepreneur, has owned multiple businesses, and really very varying businesses, kind of the whole spectrum. So she'll talk a little bit about that, including her most recent venture. But she also does the same thing that I do. So we share the same career path, and that's one of the things that she's doing currently. So that's always good when you have someone that you know and enjoy being around that's doing what you're doing, to be able to have someone to kind of bounce off of ideas and frustrations and successes and everything in between. So Wendy, if you want to kind of tell everybody who you are, where you're from, and maybe just a couple minutes about your story.
Yeah, well, thank you for having me. As you said, I'm an entrepreneur, and I have such a varying background in my businesses. There's really not any rhyme or reason. When I tell people the different things I've done, they kind of look at me with a twisted eye. But originally from Indiana, I live in Charleston, here in South Carolina. Came down here on a basketball scholarship, was a college athlete, and fell in love and never left. I think I've had one real job, I call it a real job, where I worked for someone.
What was that?
Drew a paycheck. I actually did a paid internship with Belk, the department store. I was a finance and marketing major, double major, and did a paid internship, and they offered me a job. So the day I graduated, I had a job with a salary, and I thought that was the greatest thing in the whole world until I actually started doing the job. Clocked in and clocked out. And so from there, I owned a mortgage company, was in the mortgage and real estate industry, owned an appraisal company and a real estate company. Spent about 10 years doing that, and diversified kind of as the market began to turn and turn for the worse. And that's when things got really interesting and went a different path. And I went in two kind of polar opposite paths. I opened a fitness franchise, and I always heard fitness and alcohol industry thrive in recession. You want to get fit, and they both thrive in recession. Wow. So I opened a bar and a gym. So at the same time, I was kind of doing both of those things, and still had my mortgage company, and still have the gym to this day. The food and bev industry was not for me, so that's something we built and sold, which was kind of another layer on the entrepreneurship, is going through the building of a business and selling. And then obviously I have the honor and pleasure of working with you in the insurance industry now. So that's kind of my backstory.
So tell everybody, and we had our first female guest last Friday, which I was thrilled, because I'm like, we have way too many men on the show. Like, it's just ridiculous. You
were seeming kind of chauvinistic, I think.
I know. I was like, I'm not that guy, I swear. No, but tell everybody, maybe just kind of some of your experiences being a business owner with multiple businesses and with all the different things that you've had going on. I think right now there's a huge, obviously, movement for empowering women, and it's so important. If there was a woman or a girl, like someone younger even, that's hearing their mom listening to this podcast, or their dad's listening to this in the car because their dad's a genius, what would you tell that woman, like, is one thing that can be like a solid foundation to build their career on, or something to avoid, or something that they can just mindset wise? Like what's one thing that you can think of looking back on all the different things that you've done that's kind of led to your success?
It's an interesting question. I've not ever given a lot of thought to being a female business owner versus just, a business owner. I think it's just about confidence. Yeah. I think if you can instill anything in a young girl or young female, is just having confidence in whatever it is you want to do. Not feeling like there's any limitations because, you're a woman, whatever the field is, that interests you. And, for me, it's just always been about being willing to take a risk, and, failure is just not an option, and totally mindset. And that's instilled at a young age. And for me, it was being an athlete, is where that foundation came for me. And I've just carried it through life.
And I think your opening sentence in answering that question answered everything. I mean, it's that you've never thought of ever being a difference. Like, and that's the mindset that you should have. Like, if you feel as though there's a disadvantage or an advantage, then that's the way you're going to act. So I think that's super important. Talk about one thing in your career and over these different businesses that you've had that you quit doing that enabled you to win, or that enabled you to start succeeding. Like, what's one thing that you were doing, and then when you cut that out, stop doing that, it really kind of opened things up for you?
Probably worrying. Part of being an entrepreneur is the willingness to take risks, but that doesn't mean you don't worry about what the outcome will be. Mm-hmm. And for me, learning that if you put in X, you'll get Y, help kind of reduce the stress and the worry over what's going to happen, because I learned that if I did the work and I put in the steps, that the result would come. And sometimes it takes longer than what you plan for. And certainly maybe you don't plan for how long it's going to take, but you're going to get there, and worrying about it does nothing.
That's so interesting you say that, because I mean, really, the ability, what enables you to not worry is by being able to go all in and put the work in. That's right. Because the people that are putting 100% effort, they don't really have anything to worry about. Nope. Because at the end of the day, win or lose, they've done all they could do. And that's something that our company is really focused on lately, and getting this message out to all of our coordinators, is that, like, being on and off, like, be all in, and then when you're off, be all off. But, like, you can't really be off if you hadn't first been all in.
That's right. And
being all off means the ability to not worry. Like, it means that when you're resting, you can actually be at peace, and that you can actually rest. And I talk about this, and it's perfect that we're recording this on a Friday, that Fridays are like that perfect prime time to do that, because usually people kind of coast into the weekend. Once noon hits, like, no work gets done Friday afternoons. But the ability to really rest on the weekend comes in the work that you put in all week, especially Friday afternoon. Like, if you can crush a Friday, like, you go into the weekend with the most just at peace.
Free.
Oh yeah, you're free. Exactly. Talk a little bit about, so you mentioned with the mortgage business and appraisal and real estate, and you kind of saw the writing on the wall, obviously, with where that industry was headed at that time, when things started to turn. What did that period look like for you? I mean, when you talk about worrying, that was probably a main a main emotion that was felt during that time, I would imagine. But what did that look like for you, and what did you experience during that, and where was kind of that pivot to where you were just like, okay, I got to make a switch, because this is going to happen one way or another, and I've got to either do something else or figure out how to ride this out, or what was that time like?
I mean, it was a time where you could either curl up in a ball and let it happen and lose everything, or you could take action. Yeah. And we talk about massive action with what we do with coordinators and what we do in the field, and it was no different. And people think about diversification when they deal with their assets, and mutual funds and stocks and things like that. And my mindset was how to diversify my income streams. I knew, what was happening, and obviously, it didn't happen overnight. Yeah. And so as I saw that writing on the wall, it was figuring out how to diversify the income streams and deciding, I think that I might have a little different mindset than some people about success in business, as far as, a lot of people think you have to be passionate, extremely passionate about something to be successful. And it's a beautiful thing if things line up and you have something that you're just have a burning desire every day to do. What I think breeds success is being passionate about being the best at whatever you're doing. I can't say that I was passionate about mortgages. I didn't get up with a burning desire to go write mortgages, but I had a passion to be the best mortgage banker and broker that was in the state, or with my gym, having the best studio and gym that there is. So for me, it was just the shift of mindset of where I needed to go be better at something.
And I would imagine that probably came from your history in sports, right?
Yeah, definitely.
Just always wanted to be the best. And tell a little bit of that, because you don't brag on yourself enough. So tell a little bit about your history. I think you've got some records, right? You've got some records, NCAA.
I don't know. I still hold any of those. A lot of good players now.
Was it field goals? Was it field goal percentage? What was it?
3-point.
Was it? Okay.
Yeah, there was a point in my senior year that I was the leading 3-point shooter in the country in NCAA Division I.
That's awesome.
Basketball for me is just the foundation of everything. And I tell, I was talking to a parent recently in our gym. They were talking about they have a daughter who's going, I think, to UVA to play volleyball, and there's nothing that will be taught in a classroom to that young lady that will be more impactful than what she learns as an athlete.
Absolutely.
And for me, it just carried through my entire life.
You talked about this need for passion in what you're doing, and that I believe is probably the key to so much hesitation and so much lack of taking action, because so many people are just kind of sitting back like, well, I'm still trying to figure out what I'm passionate about. Like, I'm just trying to figure out what I was born to do. But in the meantime, not really doing anything. I put a post, I think, on Instagram last week or this week. It said something to the effect of, you don't have to love what you do if you love why you do it.
Sure.
And that for us, like with insurance, like no one loves selling insurance. Like you don't love sitting across from someone and talking about when they die. Like there's not like a huge passion for the process, but you can love what it affords you to be able to do. You can love what it enables you to do outside of that. And it's so funny that the people that are kind of sit back and waiting for the next thing that comes along, that's their passion and what they were born to do, you're never going to find that unless you're completely going all in on whatever you're doing currently. Like huge opportunities don't just come to someone who's slacking off at their work waiting for the next thing. It's the person that's crushing it at their job, even though they hate it. Then the opportunity comes along because there's someone that's excelling even in an environment that they're not, truly passionate about.
Isn't that funny? The harder you work, the luckier you get.
Yeah, 100%. Absolutely. Last thing that I'll ask you, or probably second to last, but the last real question that I want to know, years and years from now, what's one thing you want to be remembered for? Like what's the one thing, let's just call it a phrase. Like, Wendy Dieterlen, man, she was, what is that for you?
Gosh.
The best 3-point shooter in.
Yeah, right. No. Wow, that's a tough question. I think, that question immediately makes me think of my godchildren.
Yeah.
And,
for sure.
A legacy of what they would think about me and remember me for. And, when my focus goes there, I have to say just that I was kind and that I was just a good person.
Yeah.
To me, there's nothing more important than them knowing that and feeling that.
Absolutely. The very last question. Who is someone, and this could be anybody, really, and I've got a list if you want me to slide it across the table, but who is someone that you would like to hear on this podcast that could be asked some of the similar questions?
Who would I like to hear? Gosh. I think it would be really interesting, at least for your viewers. I know some of the answers, but you talk about having more women on the podcast. Absolutely. I think that one of my former business partners would be, I would call her a real estate mogul, and Kelly Garrett. I think you would be very interested to hear as an entrepreneur, and just you want to talk about a hustler. Mm-hmm. She's one of the people that that I think of other than you that rivals that term.
Well, Kelly, you have been called out. So we're going to make that happen for sure. Tell everybody where they can find you online, or if there's any place you'd love for them to go to kind of find out a little bit more about what you do.
Yeah, you can find me on Facebook, just Wendy Dieterlen. That's Dieterlen. If you want to connect with me personally. If you are in the Charleston market or are visiting, check us out at our new cycling studio, Elevate Cycling, or elevateyourcycling.com. We put together a new venture there that is unique to anything else that not only in Charleston, but you'll find in South Carolina. So we're excited about that.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much
for
being on the podcast. And guys, with that, we got Wendy Dieterlen here. I'm extremely glad and just honored to have her be here in person. And again, I'm your host, Tyler Harris, and this is the BreadWinner podcast.
Thank you for listening to the BreadWinner podcast. Make sure you subscribe to the podcast and leave a rating on iTunes. For a chance to be on the show, send a screenshot of your iTunes rating to @TylerHarris page on Instagram, where he'll pick one person every single week. See you next time on the BreadWinner podcast.